right. So welcome, everyone. I see a lot of friendly faces. Thanks for coming back for our 2015 series. And I see some new faces, too. Welcome. Welcome to Clean Energy Connections. This is a creation of Solar One and NYC Acre. This is the first event of our 2015 series, which is another special collaboration between us, Solar One, NYC Acre, and Green Tech Media. Tonight we will be discussing models for the future utility, examining New York State's distributed system platform provider vision. And I'm sure all of you are well versed in that already. You wouldn't be here if you weren't. My name is Mike Simmons. I work at Solar One as a regional outreach contractor on behalf of NYSERDA, where I manage this event series and help clean tech startups and researchers connect with funding. So before we hear from our opening speaker, Micah Koch, and we kick off the event, I want to go through a few event logistics that are all very important. Green Tech Media is live streaming this event, so if you need to get up, please try and avoid the cameras. There's 1, 2, 3 there. The bar is closed during the event and to reopen after for networking, so there's really no reason to get up. Please be careful with your bottles. If they fall, they rattle, and this is a professional recording studio. They'll make a lot of noise. Last time, no one dropped their bottle. It was a record, so let's have that happen again. No bottles being dropped. Cell phones on mute, please. Make sure of that. I want to shout out our watch parties and those of us joining remotely via the live stream. We have a watch party at Harvard Business School. Thank you for joining us. In-person audience members, that's all of you. This is an interactive discussion, so if you want to ask the panel questions, you can do one of the following. You can write your questions on index cards. You should have all received a note card and a golf pencil at registration. If you did not, raise your hand, and Sam right there can grab you a note card and a pencil. So Sam will be collecting those throughout the discussion, and we'll make sure they get to the panel so the panel can answer your questions. Additionally, you can tweet. This goes for those joining us online. You can tweet by tweeting at CleanECNYC and with the hashtag CleanNRGX. Okay, so I quickly want to thank our sponsors. Without them, this wouldn't be possible. NYSERDA and NYC EDC, thank you very much. And thank you to our partners Enernol and Young Professionals in Energy. Also, thank you to our moderator, Steve Proper from Green Tech Media Research, and our panelists, Smarter Grid Solutions. I see a bunch of Smarter Grid Solutions people in the house. Central Hudson and the Governor's Office. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to our opening speaker, Micah Koch. He's the director of NY Prize and strategic advisor of innovation at NYSERDA. He is going to kick off our 2015 series for us, so please give him a warm round of applause.
All right, I'm not that short. Thank you. No, a little bit. No, that's great. All right, how's everyone doing? Good. New York City, how are you guys doing? All right, it's nice to see you here. This is our first event for 2015. For those of you who I don't know, my name is Micah Koch. I am now at NYSERDA. But this event series is kind of my baby. And I think just want to take a minute and acknowledge the fact that 5 years of, I think, doing really high quality events to help build this clean energy ecosystem in New York City is a real testament to all the people who are involved, the folks from WNYC, all of our volunteers who help make this event happen, and the support of NYSERDA and the New York City Economic Development Corporation and our other sponsors. 5 years ago when we started this, in 2000 actually, energy policy reform was really not happening in New York State. We had to pull from other states and other countries for examples of regulations and market signals that were really creating the groundwork for a clean energy economy. So what we would do is we would give one of the startups at Acre kind of a platform. We'd give them a seat on the panel. But really, New York's efforts to create a self-sustaining clean energy market were very nascent. Today, under Governor Cuomo, New York State is taking bold new steps to address critical energy challenges and explore how we generate and consume energy via the state's overarching energy plan, which is known as REV, Reforming the Energy Vision. How many of you guys are familiar with REV? Okay, good. How many of you actually read the order that came out last week? Okay, good. Say, I know this is a very sophisticated Clean Energy Connections audience. So REV is really about enabling self-sustaining clean energy markets that are going to support our energy infrastructure and drive innovation. The strategy is really comprised of 3 action-oriented pillars that will transform the way electricity is distributed and used by consumers. The evolution of state-run energy programs and what we call leading by example, which refers to governments integrating and demonstrating new clean energy strategies. What REV is really about, and this kind of comes from the Department of Public Service, is about enhancing customer knowledge and tools that will support effective management of the total energy bill, market animation and leverage of customer contributions, system-wide efficiency, fuel and resource diversity, and system reliability and resiliency, as well as the reduction of carbon emissions. So track 2 of REV, which is coming out over the next couple of months, will address performance-based rate making. And for those of you who are energy wonks, that's where things get really exciting. NYSERDA's Clean Energy Fund is going to help support these ambitious goals. We are moving to a market-based approach that will enable the whole clean energy supply chain, everyone from product developers to consumers, from financial institutions to building managers, to create these self-sustaining energy markets. But importantly, as we change, we're even more committed to using our resources to support low to moderate income residents to ensure that these populations are not left out of the clean energy economy as we support the growth of clean energy markets. When Governor Cuomo first took office, he made it clear that transforming the way that energy is produced and delivered in New York was one of his major goals. And Hurricane Sandy, which hit New York 2 years later with widespread outages and an estimated $50 billion in damage, further drove home the need for a fundamental shift to become better prepared for keeping the lights on in an emergency. And it's not only damage from storms that's costing our citizens here in New York. A number of critical issues drive the need to reform our electricity markets, including the fact that approximately $30 billion paid for entirely by you, me, and every other New York City electric customer will need to be spent over the next decade just to maintain the current generation and distribution capabilities. And that's compared to $17 billion that we spent over the last 10 years. Further, as extreme weather events continue to affect communities across the state, it's becoming increasingly clear that meaningful action to mitigate climate change is a necessary policy for any responsible state government. We really shouldn't just be patching an antiquated system, we should be building it back better. These are some of the reasons why we've recently launched New York Prize, which is a 3-stage competition that's going to lead to large-scale demonstration projects designed to optimize grid resiliency and consumer load flexibility by promoting microgrids. Through New York Prize, we propose to support the installation of these microgrids around the state to improve power resiliency and efficiency, while demonstrating the benefits of this innovative technology to encourage even more projects and scale in the future. New York Prize will inform the REV process and ultimately will result in at least 5 what we call REV labs across the state, where community microgrids can show a path to a stronger bulk power system via an increase in system efficiency, affordability, choice, and control for customers. We anticipate funding feasibility work in storm-impacted communities across the state, especially right here in New York City, as the competition is now open and can be found at prize.ny.gov. So that's my quick plug. prize.ny.gov. Applications are open now. One of the fundamental recognition of the REV initiative is that our electricity grid contains a diverse set of value streams that are related to data, customer satisfaction, reliability and resilience, convenience, and ancillary services, amongst others. Some of these societal benefits are not valued by the market today, but may be in the future, and that's why it's vital that New York Prize projects show how new technologies and business models can capitalize on these various value streams and how benefits can be distributed between the utility, third parties, and customers. Prize, we hope, will give utilities experience in serving as the DSP, and you're going to hear about that soon. So this series that we're kicking off this year begins with this discussion of a central tenet of REV, that system operators at the retail, at the distribution level, will serve as the DSP. And hopefully what that means is more rooftop solar, it means more energy efficiency, it means more demand response to reduce demand on the grid. So local service providers, utilities like Con Edison, Central Hudson, and others will evolve to become this DSP and serve in that role, and will begin the process of building a more efficient and transactive grid, as well as integrating with the New York ISO's wholesale electricity markets. As Mother Jones put it recently, this is as exciting as public service law gets. And our esteemed panel will further illuminate what happens in this brave new world. So without further delay, thank you all for being here. And now join me in welcoming Steve and the rest of the panel.
Welcome. Great to see so many folks here in the room. I'd like to introduce our panel, and then from there I think we'll get started, and looking forward to a really spirited conversation. Sitting directly next to me here is Kate Burson. Kate Burson is Chief of Staff to the Chairman of Energy and Finance at the Officer of the Governor of New York. So we're extremely excited to have her here with us. Next to her is Jerry Doherty, CEO of Smart Grid Solutions. Did I get your last name? Perfect. Close. Okay, perfect. And Charlie Frenny, who is the SVP at Central Hudson Gas and Electric. I was looking in the back and I saw a number of folks, actually a majority of folks, are very familiar with REV and very familiar with this whole concept of a DSP, but I thought a good way to kick it off is just to make sure we level set, and Kate, maybe you can just kind of give some thoughts on really where you sit in terms of the themes and principles that are really driving this whole notion of the creation of a DSP and within this REV structure.
Yes, well, thanks, and thanks for having us for this great event.
Sure.
As Micah spoke about just a minute ago, REV was really took off with Hurricane Sandy and a need for a 21st century utility system. And we've been spending a lot of money, and we think that the technology exists today to get a lot more from it. So this was back in 2012. We hired the first state energy czar, and we've been leading this process since then. And REV is really about animating markets, so mobilizing markets to bring in innovation, private capital, just kind of all the creativity that we're seeing in a lot of different industries, and trying to create a more efficient, affordable, cleaner system that we think we can have today. So REV is really, the regulatory process is one piece of it, but you also have how can NYSERDA and the other state organizations also support this growth, because regulations, again, even if you were to get the regulations exactly right, there's still a lot of different levers that government can help with to help the market grow and make sure it goes in the clean direction and resilient direction that we need it to.
Great. Jerry, one of the big topics really around the role of the DSP is this whole notion of data and data exchanges, and really how is that going to flow between a DSP, third parties, distributed energy resource owners. Can you give us kind of your thoughts around kind of what you see as that vision is? And I would love to hear also from the panelists kind of response to that.
Yeah, I think you're right. If you look at what the requirement is for the DSPs to operate successfully, then there are two major things will happen on the data front. First is there will be a significant increase in the volume of data required to manage the system. So not simply metering data, but also an understanding of market data and instantaneous pricing and so on and so forth. So when we're talking about animating the market, we're talking about creating a very, very large volume of data. In addition to that, in order to be able to do the control, or the demand response controls, and being able to provide flexible connections for DER of all types, then there's a very large amount of real-time data which is going to be managed there as well. And so there's a very large increase in the amount of data. In order for the overall system to operate successfully, there is an absolute requirement to share that data. Now, in most business models, what you find is that data is power, and data gives you competitive advantage, and so the natural inclination of most parties in most markets is to have little bits of data which they keep private to themselves. I think for this overall REV program to work successfully, we have to understand what are the incentives which we need to put in place which encourage people not to keep that data, but in actual fact to be able to share it with one another. Because if you look at the model sometime out from here, what you'll find is you have a number of ISOs, a number of DSPs who are operating perhaps in geographically distinct areas and interfacing with the ISO and interfacing with other market players. Now, for that to work successfully, everybody needs to be in the tent. So the DSP needs to be successfully communicating with the ISO, but they need to be successfully communicating with other people and sharing data with them too. So there are two big challenges there. One is huge amount of data is going to come into play, which hasn't previously been needed, and an absolute requirement to share that data somehow or other. So we need to commercially incentivize the various players within the domain to share the data with the others.
Charlie, from a utility perspective, I mean, just building on that topic, I mean, do you have any sort of thoughts in terms of kind of what that role looks like, what incentives make sense, where you see it being kind of beneficial to, a DSP model that you could potentially morph into?
And I agree with Jerry, there's just a tremendous amount of data that's really going to be necessary for this to work effectively. And sticking just really to the DSPP, or DSP, I guess as we call it today, what I'm really, and I'm not going to focus on customer data at this point because that's a whole nother issue, but what we really need is operational data, and then you need system planning data. And the operational data is going to be real-time data that's coming in, and the DSP is essentially going to be part of operating that system. Likely behind it will be distribution management systems that are communicating with equipment, but it's really kind of monitoring the system and making real-time decisions based on the data that's coming back. You could say it's analogous to what the ISO gets in regard to system data, but when you get to the distribution level, the distribution is actually a lot more complicated than the transmission system. The number of operations that take place on a distribution system in the course of the day far exceeds probably what happens in a year on a transmission system. So there's a lot of real-time interaction. But then there's the data for planning purposes and understanding, where do DERs provide value? Where is there an opportunity for a distributed resource to replace a T&D wires project? And, that gets a little bit more complicated when it comes to sharing data. It doesn't necessarily make sense to say, we're just going to broadcast, our voltage and current flows on a real-time basis to everybody, and you can decide where you want to put a distributed resource. First of all, that's not all of the data. Second of all, it would just be overwhelming for anybody to filter through that and try to make decisions. So really, the DSP has to act as the party that's going to integrate these resources into the system and essentially understand where they're best applied, what value do they bring to the system. And the piece of data that generally isn't out there is really what's changing with customers. And an area may look very attractive, but customer information, and we deal with a lot of large customers that say their energy information is confidential information. You don't share this with anybody, it's confidential. So, I'll use IBM because they're in our territory and they're quite large. We'd never share IBM data with anybody, but I know what's happening with IBM. And you may think a good location for a distributed resource makes sense based on the data you see, but it may not based on what we know. So, we become a trusted resource for those customers, and that's a very important piece of information when doing that distribution planning. And obviously, it even sometimes ties into transmission planning. So, from the operating side of the business, there's the real-time data, but then there's also the integrated planning of the development of that distribution grid.
Great. Sorry to pick on you, Charlie, too, but I
Right.
have a second question here, which is I know a number of folks in the room are obviously coming from a very kind of New York City, in the local area here, where a lot of the discussion around REV has really been around, resiliency and planning and large scale T&D capital deferment. Up in your service territory, I think there are other applications of this framework that you see that are not just around kind of distribution congestion. Do you want to talk a little bit more about how kind of REV impacts your service territory and your customers maybe differently than what we see here downstate?
Okay, sure. So for those of you that think only Con Ed is the only utility in New York, we are located really north of Westchester up to Albany, so we have the beautiful Hudson Valley. That's Central Hudson service territory. And interestingly enough, within our service territory, solar has really taken off. We have more than 2,500 solar installations on rooftops The requests continue to come in, and we can continue to process them. So there is a tremendous amount of distributed resources already in our service territory, but absent an intelligent grid, and absent a network communications infrastructure and a distribution management system, we really don't have any visibility into the value or detriment that those facilities provide to the grid. And none of those facilities today are being compensated based on the value they bring. You know, they're essentially compensated through net metering. And so certainly from where we sit, we see the opportunity already to be able to take, I want to say, better advantage of those resources, be able to better understand the implications. You know, we certainly do studies when a resource is going to connect to our distribution system to understand the impact. The systems, for the most part, are small, but we are beginning to see 1 and 2 megawatt systems coming online, so they have different implications. And so you certainly see that opportunity. And so then it leads to kind of really a little bit more sophisticated other distributed resource planning. I mean, today we have energy efficiency programs, and those energy efficiency programs are essentially broad-based programs for all of our customers across the system, but you may find that it makes a lot more sense to target and pay more for energy efficiency in a particular area based on what's going on. We also see the opportunity, and we are building out a network communications infrastructure as well as a distribution management system to kind of better manage the voltage on our system. If you're familiar at all with distribution systems, the intent is to make sure the last customer on the line has acceptable voltage. And so in order for the last customer on the line to get acceptable voltage and the first customer on the line to have acceptable voltage as well, you know, you do kind of run, and we have long distribution circuits. I mean, our distribution circuits, you know, would cover a territory sometimes larger than all of Manhattan. So, I mean, they're covering quite a bit of territory, and so you need to manage that voltage. And so, you know, we think there's real opportunities through a network communications and distribution management system to better align that voltage. So today I'm outputting from a substation probably about 126 volts, and the customer at the end of the line, you know, I'm targeting that they have 119 volts, no less than 116 volts. So by the time you ultimately plug in your appliance, you're at 110 volts. And so obviously that, you know, if I'm pushing out, if I have the opportunity to bring that voltage down on the front end and raise it up on the back end of the circuit, customers on the back end of the circuit will actually see less kilowatt hours through their meters. And so, you know, managing that voltage, and when we look at it, overall, it provides a net positive to customers by just managing a voltage. And so, you know, that ties back into the DSP. It ties back into distributed resources along the circuit in managing that voltage. And that's just really kind of one element of some of the things that we're talking about.
Great. Pulling it back just for 1 second, Kate, I mean, the change that's being proposed here and that's been put forth, I mean, isn't this just analogous to change we've seen in other markets too as well? And how are you and the governor's office really looking at change that's either happened within the technology sector or even consumer electronics as ways to kind of, you know, take lessons learned in terms of real large-scale market change a la, you know, telecommunications in the 1980s?
Yes, I mean, we see this as, I mean, this is happening throughout many industries today. I mean, telecom is a good example of an area, an industry that deregulated. You have lots of choice. I know it used to be that AT&T owned everything, including your phone. And today we're paying much less for dial tone service, but a much larger wallet share for our cell phones. And you now are obviously paying it because you see more value there. And so we're seeing it with, I mean, a lot of, I guess, less capital intensive industries from, you know, hotels with Airbnb, transportation with Ubers and relay rides. And really, thanks to the communications infrastructure, the ability to develop networks instead of command and control systems. And so that has very much informed our thinking, and we really believe and have evidence behind it that the utility industry can also evolve. And so just on this point, I mean, the utilities in New York State have about 55% capacity utilization. I mean, compare that with you know, auto manufacturing, which is up to, I believe, like 79%. And this is, I'm not being critical of New York because this is actually good for, compared to the rest of the country, and this is actually pretty good. But I think what we see and kind of what the governor also represents is we don't want to just be the best at kind of in our niche. We want to be the best that we can be. And if technology exists today to create the better infrastructure, not just for the businesses, but for customers to really get something that they want out of the system, that's what we want to enable. So I feel very strongly that this is the moment, and we're doing it together.
Can I add to that? Because I do think that the market change or the style which needs to be adopted by some of the companies is akin to, it's analogous to the revolution within the telecoms industry. So if you look at, what did AT&T look like 25 years ago? What does it look like now? How does it act? How does it behave? It is a completely different organization. And we are asking that of the utility companies, I think, when we look at REV. So for many years now, what we've done with utility companies, in the UK, all the way through Europe, and I think within the United States too, is we've looked for efficiency, we've looked for cost reduction, we've driven it by price, at the same time as we expect reliability, resiliency, security of supply, and so on and so forth. Now, what that leads to is an organization which by any definition has to be cautious and thoughtful and steady and easy, and let's not rush to do things which are too risky. And that's the nature of the organization. The organization is responding to the environment in which it finds itself. If you look at the utility as a DSP, then what are we needing there? Well, wind it out 10 years, 15 years. What are we looking for? We're looking for forward thinking, we're looking for inventive, we're looking for real-time, fast response to market changes and so on and so forth. It's a different beast, right? But in the same way that AT&T went on that journey, then so also can the utility companies. But there is one difference here, which is within the telecoms industries and some of the other industries you look at, and you understand what was the dynamic that actually made that change. In many cases, it was the individual consumer, right? Do we have the same drive from individual consumers of electricity as we would have had from individual consumers of telecoms products or individual consumers of other products where we have changed the market significantly? And that's one thing which I think is we're going to be a bit light on going through. Too many individuals don't really care as long as the lights are on. That's important. They might be comforted by the fact that we're moving towards a clean energy situation, but it's not driving them on a day-to-day basis, unlike a smartphone or some sort of new tablet. So there are analogies to be drawn, but there are also little challenges which perhaps means we can't quite replicate the environment which the telecoms companies found themselves in 20 years ago.
I think the AT&T analogy is probably the most common one used because it's a utility that was transformed and we're dealing with utilities. But I think today when you look at what's going on, you have to have much broader perspective than that. And like one example that I like is Uber. What is Uber doing? Uber is taking your asset and using it to create my business. And I think that's an interesting concept. Uber didn't go out and buy a bunch of cars, you did, and now you're using it to make my business better, and guess what I'm doing? I'm providing a service to customers. And that's what I see with a lot of distributed resources. I mean, people are investing in resources and putting those resources on their homes or their businesses because there's certain things that they want, but there's an opportunity, I think, to kind of leverage those resources, provide compensation to those customers for those resources where they can help the grid. When I took the train down and to get over here, I had a number of options. I could have walked. It was a beautiful day to walk, but I was afraid I'd get all sweaty by the time I got here. I generally love taking the subway because like the utility system that may be only at 55% capacity, I think that's like 120% capacity. So great efficiency there. And then jump in a cab, and I felt important today, so I thought I'd do that. And an Uber car drives by me. And so I said, there's all these options. And, I don't think if you asked one of our customers what their options are, they may say, well, I could buy energy from Central Hudson or I could buy it from an ESCO. And so what I really see happening is that we really need to be able to provide customers, and we really need customers to be really an asset that we're collaborating with. and not an asset that we're feeding and just telling them this is what you get. And that's what successful businesses do, is they really collaborate with their customers and they understand what their needs are and they tailor products to their needs. And we have different types of customers. We have commercial customers, we have industrial customers, we obviously have residential customers. And even within all those classes, they have different needs and they have different wants. And I think, you know, the real opportunity here is to kind of collaborate with those customers to understand what they want. But, you know, we also have to have the perspective that, well, we may not necessarily be able to provide everything they want, and we should collaborate with others that can bring products and services to the market that allows customers to be able to ultimately have a utility bill that's like my cable bill, which when I first signed up for cable, I think it was like $35 a month. And now I have all these other things, which I guess were my choice. And so it's now like, you know, $130 a month. But I'm happy because I decided that's where I want to be. And so, you know, we want customers then not necessarily to have a lower bill, but feel as though they're getting value for what they are paying and ultimately decide, you know, what are the services that they want. You know, Central Hudson has made, you know, the decision that we are not going to roll out smart meters to every customer. I've often said I will deliver a customer a smart meter when they call and they ask me for one. And I've actually changed from that and said, you know, well, customers will never ask me for a smart meter. But they want services, and that's what I really want to sell, is services to customers. And if it needs a smart meter, then I should decide that. Again, going back to the cable company, I didn't ask for the Samsung 2800 box on my TV. I said, just give me NFL and Major League Baseball and something else. And they said, okay, this is the box you need. I'm like, oh, okay, that's good. And I think that's where we need to be. We should be selling services to customers and not really kind of dictating, this is what you get when you take service from us.
Can I just follow up on that, Charlie? Because if you wind forward to the situation where you are a DSP and you have all the responsibilities and authorities of a DSP, aren't you then in the position where you want a smart meter in the home? Because you want to know that data. Because you're going to make use of that in order to maximize the position of the overall. When
I look at our service territory, and I just want to speak for Central Hudson because everybody's a little bit different, you know, we're looking to build out a network communications infrastructure. And through that communications infrastructure, I will be able, at a much, 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 much lower cost than installing a meter on everybody's home that can connect to that grid, just through the sensors on the grid to give me the information I need to make those decisions. Yeah. And so I absolutely agree. I need that data in order to be able to run the DSPP. But I don't necessarily want to build the Mercedes communications network until I can really get the value for it. And so that's why we're kind of taking the direction that we're going today.
I just want to jump in on one thing about the bills. I think what you will have that you don't have right now is the choice. If you want to have just a lower bill, just like now, if you want to have a pay-as-you-go phone, you can do that and you can limit your cost. But if you do want, you know, NFL and baseball and all of that, the equivalent for energy, you'll also be able to get that. And I guess thinking of other industries, while it's not terribly popular, I mean, the whole unbundling that's going on today with cable television, and that you can now buy HBO on iTunes, and you can buy, and then you also look at the airline industry. That's also, if you want to fly in a really inexpensive way, you can take, in Europe, say, you can get tickets for 25 euros as long as you promise to like weigh below 50 pounds and like don't bring any luggage with you. But you know, so I mean, there's all this unbundling that we can complain about because we aren't used to paying for things individually. And I think there's a tremendous amount of value in the electric system that we're all taking for granted, and you can unbundle it and you can have a choice to pay less and then pay for the extra options.
Great. I'm going to actually jump in with it. There's a question from the audience, and I'm just going to open it up to whoever wants to answer it first. Is there any plan to seriously study cogen to determine when it should or shouldn't be applied? And I'm assuming that would mean, you know, when does cogeneration essentially, how does this work within this DSP model? How do you kind of plan for it, and really, where do folks see that playing a role?
Can I
Sure.
Well, just one framing point for all of this is we're used to looking at things, I think, from kind of one-off. If there's a CHP system in this part, and not looking, instead of looking at it like from a portfolio perspective, and ideally looking beyond just CHP, but looking at energy services, and kind of starting to see how this can turn into a network where each unit can actually support the other system, the other building, which that's a framework that we're hoping the utilities keep in mind as they're managing the DSP. I mean, specifically, cogen and it needs to be studied, but I think it needs to be studied in the context of a network system. So.
Other thoughts?
I mean, I really see it as just another distributed resource, and it becomes very customer specific based on their circumstances. And we do talk to customers about it all the time, and it's a lot of times it's kind of left up to them as to whether or not that kind of fits their business model. But it does now offer new opportunities when you begin to think about microgrids, because that can become a resource within a microgrid. And that can offer value today more than it has in the past when you didn't consider microgrids. I think CHP is great, and I almost think CHP in a lot of cases becomes really kind of the kind of the cornerstone of a microgrid sometimes, so that you're not dealing with a reciprocating engine to kind of be your primary generator. But in many cases, what you'll find with cogeneration and CSP is that they may not even meet the host's load. So there isn't always necessarily an opportunity to kind of go beyond the host site. But where there is that opportunity, or where there is opportunity to supplement that, it does become a valuable resource, I think.
I think if I can add to that, it comes back to that big data question at the beginning. So given that there are going to be a number of different ways to play within this network, and if cogen and microgrids and so on are part of this, right, then there's an increased requirement to share data, right? And this is going to be one of our big challenges. If you're going to manage a DSP's domain, if you like, and you accept that all of these different methods are going to be a part of that domain, then you need to understand how you're going to share data. So, how are microgrids going to be able to communicate on and off grids in different circumstances? What's going to happen when you have failures and you're looking to recover quickly? There's a lot of data to be shared in these circumstances.
And I think to Jerry's point is, you need to understand the reliability of the system too, because obviously you need to be able to support it when it's not there. But it does offer opportunities for demand response as well. So, I think, in addition to offering, a variety of different services, I think one of the things that, utilities look at is, different revenue streams. Everything doesn't need to come out of the pocket of the customer. There are other revenue streams that this can create that ultimately lead to the customer, paying more for the value they get, just partnering with others and bringing others to deliver services to customers. But it doesn't always have to be paid by the customer. And I think up to this point in time, other revenue streams are relatively limited.
Right. So we've been talking about a lot of change here in this space. We're talking about bringing in all these new distributed resources. We're talking about the ability to have robust networks, even having applications such as the Ubers of energy. I mean, are we ready? Are utilities ready? Do we have the workforce to actually be able to respond to this change in a timely way, to essentially deliver on a lot of the promises and a lot of the tenants that are in REV and that are in this whole new DSP model?
Can I maybe offer a couple of thoughts here, just based on our experience in the UK? So if I characterize what's happening in New York, I would say that the REV picture is a better painted picture of what will ultimately be a broadly acceptable smart grid than I've seen in any other domain. So the picture is great, but the picture is in broad brushstrokes. Okay, and we're not entirely sure what the journey is going to be to actually get us there, and we're just taking those first steps just now. In other domains, particularly within the UK, we've taken a number of the first steps. So we're further ahead, if you like, within the UK in terms of the deployment of some of the technologies which are going to form a part of meeting the REV vision. So Smart Grid Solutions' own specific capabilities are to do with autonomous, deterministic real-time control of DER, right? So we're integrating that into the grid within the UK. And those systems have gone operational. Now, what actually happened there was, that was on the back of pump-primed, government-funded innovation, not unlike some of the stuff that's happening within the New York domain and other states. And what actually happened there was, the regulator was very clear that those innovation funds weren't for hand flapping, they were for getting things over the line and into use. And they wanted to see that stuff happening on the ground in operational systems. And so, now we have rolled out across the UK on islands, and we've done EV charging management systems. We've got all sorts of things integrated into the system, quad boosters and all sorts. So we've made a lot of progress there. But what the UK doesn't have is that long-term picture, which is quite as good as REV. But what it has led to is, interestingly, significant workforce development within the utility companies in the UK. So the way in which they handled the network manager, the innovation funds, were to effectively set aside teams, and they called them forward planning or future networks or something or other. And so you get little teams of people within the utility company who are going to take this innovation and take it out to the market. And that innovation fund effectively came to a close about a year ago, where the regulator then said, okay, so this is now business as usual, roll it out. And what the utility companies are finding is that's quite a challenge, because in effect what they've got to do is take their future networks team, who all get it, they understand it, they know what they're trying to do and so on, and allow them to infiltrate the thinking sets and the mindsets of the guys who would say that's just dangerous, right? So they're now on an education program internally within the utility companies from the future networks team, and using other people to come in and say, oh, it's okay, I know that's how you used to do network planning, but look, there's another way to do it. I know that's how you used to connect up with potential solar PV and so on, but here's a new way to do it. And so there's a big education program within the utility companies just now, and it's going to be a remarkably slow process, because the regulations which apply to a utility company in the UK are not unlike the regulations that apply to a utility company in the United States. And so the return of shareholder value still depends on that asset management and getting the return on that asset, and it doesn't yet depend upon being innovative. Now, what does also happen within the UK, and it's maybe something which you need to think about in terms of REV, is there is a new regulatory settlement within the UK for the utility companies. And what it does is it looks ahead 8 years, right? So the regulatory settlement applies now from 2015, and it runs through to 2023. And it's called RIO, and RIO is about incentives, innovations, and outputs, right? And within the RIO agreement, there are really detailed business plans which need to be submitted by all of the distribution utilities within the UK to explain to the regulator how they're going to make use of that money, and the regulator explains to the distribution utility how they're going to reward them for that, and hence be able to return shareholder value, because nobody wants a poor utility. That's really bad news, guys. You need utilities that are well backed by their shareholders and are going to be very successful in the long term. So if if anybody has the time, or if they haven't done it so far, do go and have a look at publicly available information in the UK from all of the major utility companies, going into great detail about how they're going to bring innovation into the market. And the regulators similarly going into great detail about how they're going to be rewarded for that. So there's a journey there to be had within the New York domain, I think. Again, it's all about this big publication, publicly available data. You'd be frightened, I think, if you look at what's in the UK and what's publicly available in the UK, which would normally be regarded as commercially confidential information. Huge amounts of it. So there's a workforce development topic to be got here.
Kate, any thoughts from sort of a New York perspective?
I mean, we're very aware. I mean, this, even if we weren't transforming the system, there are real needs in workforce development. A lot of the workforce is older, and younger people have been going into finance, and now Silicon Valley, and we need more power engineers. We need more people going into this industry. So there's a combination of just what's happening as a natural flow, and also that we need people who can start leading this new system with kind of a new mental framework and approach.
But how exciting is this going to be? I mean, if you're a young power systems engineer just now, if we actually get going with REV, if we do actually start changing this market, how exciting is that going to be? This is going to be the place to work.
That's a plug for power engineers in the room.
Oh, okay.
They're tough to find.
Question from the audience. In terms of DR value, I'm assuming that would be demand response value. Do any of you foresee a market for reactive power, and what would that look like? And I think that's an interesting question, particularly as you see here downstate and with Con Ed, really the use of demand response as a way to essentially shore up the need to be able to meet their power needs. So if folks have sort of thoughts on that,
Well,
please
I
chime
mean,
in.
I think, we are, obviously we have capacitors out on the system, providing bars to the system, but certainly when I speak about value to a distributed resource like a solar installation, I mean, they do provide bar value to the system, which is why it's so critical that I understand exactly what it's doing. I mean, I said I have 2,500 installations out there, and I can't tell you what they're doing to the system. I don't have any ability to understand what kind of voltage rise they create. And in fact, if you get too many together, some systems cannot even feed back in because they'll be pushed back as a result of voltage rise from the other systems. So there are circuits that do need the VAR support. And so, that's why I say nobody's being paid for the value they bring. And I have switch capacitors out there, and that will look at that and they'll switch themselves off. But today, we're not managing the system. It's just kind of operating, and somebody calls in and says, I'm blowing light bulbs, and we'll be like, okay, we'll be right out and see what's going on. But you need to be ahead of that, and I think that's where it goes. So I can't tell you what the market would be for reactive power, but it certainly has value. I mean, we're providing it to the system today. Sometimes we ask generators to provide it as well, so it is there.
Well, I mean, I think it's part of the big picture. Technologically, it can be handled. The question is, can you fit it into the market somehow? Can you gather sufficient real-time data to be able to manage it successfully? So, yeah.
That's our dream. And
Right.
I mean, also just with demand response, there are going to be real incentives for kind of the system efficiency, and load shifting and demand response is going to provide tremendous value for the utility, for their pocketbooks, and for consumers' pocketbooks. It's going to help reduce everyone's. That's one of the main one tool to reduce bills that we're going to be taking on. I have actually one thing really quickly.
Sure.
I can paint a picture of what the NFL and baseball of energy looks like for you right now. I mean, I could have saved this for the end, but I'm going to just jump in here. I mean, we're moving to a time where you see kind of distributed systems coming out of healthcare, for example, and there's more healthcare going into the home. You see, all of the connected home there. You're all of a sudden going to need electricity and your broadband. It's going to all need to be more resilient. And so while you might not be thinking about your energy system, you might be thinking, well, I don't want, if this stuff goes down, that's going to be bad for my life. So I want a storage here. And maybe if I have solar with my storage, then that gives me a little bit of independence. And when I go on vacation, sure, I'll sell my power back to the grid, and that, yeah. Why not? I'm not using it, and my neighbor can use it. So I think similar to the broadband infrastructure, people very rarely think about it. What we love about it is what it enables. It enables us to communicate and our life to progress. And I think that's what an advanced energy system is going to enable as well.
Great. Charlie, I think this one is mostly for you. Do utilities see issues with managing all this increased data that's going to be coming in from these distributed energy resources? And is this a potential opportunity for startups in this space?
An opportunity for what?
Startups or new businesses in this space.
Well, it's managing what we really want to be able to manage is the information. We want to turn that data into information. And so we are looking at distribution management systems. There are companies out there that offer distribution management systems. And so we'd be bringing the data back in. And what the distribution management system is really going to do through algorithms is really you can do it in a couple of ways. I mean, believe it or not, there's a fair number of intelligent devices that we have on the distribution system that aren't communicating back. Vendors are making them. They aren't all yet connected. We have some that communicate with each other. So when they see a fault, one will open, the other one will close, it'll isolate it, and we get an email that said, by the way, this is what just happened. So you do need data management systems behind the scene feeding into distribution management systems that will help you run your DSP. So big data is in the utility business. I mean, there's going to be a tremendous amount of that data and the need for big data management. Somebody asked, I think earlier, are utilities ready? Well, I think we aren't ready. If we were ready, then we'd say we're way too late. We should have done this a long time ago. So we're kind of developing things as we go and understanding the needs. And I think there's going to be a tremendous number of products that will be coming to the market that be able to do things that there just hasn't been a demand for before because there weren't these networks and these communication systems. And even behind the meter, we're looking at products for customers that will help them manage their energy use if that's what they're interested in, giving customers the opportunity to have alerts. And, and again, I say you got to look across a lot of businesses. I'm sure if you, I know I have, American Express card that gives me alerts whenever my card is charged and it wasn't present, and gives me alerts when I've hit spending limits. It lets me know what's going on, and I think you can do the same thing in your home. If you know your average bill is $200 a month, you may want to know, okay, when, did I hit $200, the second week of the month, or am I still on track? And so, you can offer services that give customers kind of that odometer reading to understand where they are. So there's a lot of things I think that are even probably beyond our imagination at this point that people may find valuable. And some things that we'll probably describe to you today that you say, I don't think I'd ever use that. And then when you get it, you say, wow, this is kind of neat. And I kind of find that with the Nest thermostat. I said, who looks at that thermostat? Well, I put one in. I look at it all the time now, and only because I can, I guess. But so I think there's a lot of things to happen. There's a long runway. But, I think as Jerry said, the picture is painted with broad strokes, and we're working on trying to better refine that. And, one of the early things that we're looking at right now are standards and protocols, and understanding what are proper standards and protocols that we should be deploying. It's not creating them, but there's a lot of standards and protocols out there, and that really helps a lot of parties if they understand what the standards and protocols are for designing products, for implementing products into the system as well.
I think just the mention of the Nest, I don't think we can ignore the Nest topic. When you talked about startups, then startups are quite useful. Quite often they are disruptive within the market. But you've got to ask the question, why did Google pay crazy money to buy a thermostat manufacturer? And the reason is because they're interested in the smart grid. They can see that picture 15, 20 years out from here. So they're starting in the home, and they're going to be owners of data in the home. They're going to be able to aggregate that data. Perhaps they're going to be a player in the market as the DSP markets start to develop. If they do that, then when are they going to come to the supply side of that equation? Because I can't imagine an organisation like that does things by half. So there are disruptive players who will look to adjust and influence the ways in which we think that the REV picture is going to paint out. So it won't just be startups coming in to do something different. There will be opportunities for other intermediaries, other disruptive players to come in and somehow or other adjust the market going forward.
Can I actually add to this? So last week, the Track 1 order came out and said that the utilities will serve as the DSP right now. In the comments, I don't know if any of you saw this, but Walmart responded, and they said they wanted to be the DSP. Yeah. So, I mean, they didn't get it this time, but that's real.
Yeah, but I mean, wind forward from here, where's the best place to be in this whole market is let's be the DSP. Being the DSP in an operating market like this is highly attractive. So it won't just be attractive to utility companies, it'll be attractive to others. Question is, how do you manage that going forward?
This is an interesting one. So this is a bit of a pivot. do you all see PJM and the Northeast ISO's capacity performance proposals as a solution for valuing fuel diversity in the system? Is this something likely that we could see or could be possible within the New York environment? I'm not sure who asked that question.
Yeah, I'm not familiar enough with
Yeah.
PJM to understand what they're doing.
Neither am I.
Any thoughts?
I'm not going to answer that one.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. So if you give the toughest question award, that's
Well,
good
I
Yeah.
guess
so far.
that one could be saved for the cocktail hour. How will REV bring transparency to the usage and cost of energy in a way that will facilitate consumer engagement with distributed resources? I think we've already answered part of this, but I think probably what this question is getting at is really into much more of the mechanics. Me as a consumer, how am I gonna see this transparency in the market, and really whose role is that, and how will that be managed?
Can I suggest initially you're going to see it through intermediaries? So you're not going to see it directly yourself. But you will have service providers coming to you and saying, I can give you this data. I can give you analytics. I can give you an understanding of, what your energy costs are, how you can do something about it, et cetera, et cetera. So you will find service providers, intermediaries come into the market there. And it will be some time thereafter before you're able and sufficiently educated and understanding in the market yourself to decide as an individual consumer. So again, it's not unlike that telecoms journey, where first of all there's an intermediary telling you how to do it, and now you can do it yourself.
And I think that this will happen very quickly. Right now, it feels to the most educated people out there like there is little transparency, and it's very difficult to understand a utility bill. And so a priority of the states is really to figure out what is the data exchange and how do we get information out there so that you can make easier choices and make an informed choice without having a PhD. So that's figuring out how to protect customer data, but also enable them to share it very easily. So it's like just as easy as when Facebook, you want to sign up for something and you can push, I'll go through my Facebook account or something, make it that seamless. That's what we want to move to, and that will probably be one of the earlier signs of transparency.
Yeah, I mean, we absolutely feel that transparency is important for the customers. I mean, customers at this point in time are confused and they don't really understand the energy market. And there's, I think, more than 100 energy service providers in New York that make offers to customers, and customers just don't have a good sense of visibility in regard to price. What's a good price? What's not a good price? What's a good deal? What's not a good deal? I mean, people know when they go and buy a gallon of gasoline because they're close to what a gallon of gasoline costs. I decided that, I'm going to go through the process of reaching out to ESCOs and seeing what kind of offers I get. And there are, every utility in the state has a system where we call it the green button, where you can broadcast your personal data about your usage out to the energy service providers, and energy service providers can come back and say, I'm willing to make this offer to you. And I think I did that in the fall. I just got an offer the other day. It was my first offer. I've heard, a lot of people catch me at the gym or one place or another and ask me all kinds of questions about the ESCO offer they got. And I really, can't comment one way or another. But I got this offer, and it was for $6.99, 7 cents a kilowatt hour, which is a pretty good price. I was looking at our bill, and we have obviously a price that has hedging and all kinds of other things in it that we buy on behalf of our customers. And I think my most recent one was 8 or 9 cents. So, and I'm reading all the fine print, trying to find out what else is here. Why is this a good deal? And I still have till March 22nd to decide. So, so I'm looking at it.
Yeah.
But so that seems to be the biggest issue for customers, is being able to determine whether it's a good deal or not. I can tell you I've looked at some, and the highest one I saw, a customer was paying $1 a kilowatt hour. So clearly that customer didn't know what they were doing. And so transparency is absolutely necessary so people can make good decisions. And so what we'd like to be able to see is not only transparency on price, but transparency on other opportunities that they can take advantage of. and other services that may be offered, and so that they can get NFL or Major League Baseball if they want to. But we want to be able to, I think, ultimately create a platform for customers that's, some of which is fed from the DSP to provide information to customers and kind of create this market and this exchange so people can participate. But certainly we need to be able to provide customers the right tools and information to be able to make decisions. People can understand it with the right information, and we absolutely believe that the simpler you make it, the better opportunity is for people to accept it. But it comes across as being very complicated, and I don't think it needs to.
Great. We have another question about data aggregation, and I think we've probably touched on this a bit, but probably merits maybe a bit more discussion. And the question is, what is the role for the biggest aggregators of private data, companies like Google or OPower or Facebook? Where do you see their role in either Rev or in this whole notion of Utility 2.0?
Yeah, what I see as being a big part, and I think it's things that those companies do, is really kind of creating some virtual communities where customers can talk and share information. And so, someone like me isn't necessarily the person who lives next door to me. It's someone that has similar interests and similar goals and desires, whether it be renewables or other things. But I think there's opportunities to be able to use information that we have, information that some of these other data aggregators have, to be able to begin to create some of these communities so people can begin to talk. And I think that's how some products can get developed, by understanding what people really want and desire.
We were actually in a conversation recently just talking about community solar, and is community your physical geography, or is it kind of the virtual community? And you can plug into both. And so but to the question, I don't think we even have any idea yet of what can happen and what can be. I don't, at least. A lot.
Great. Well, we're getting at time, so I think I want to give our panelists an opportunity to give some kind of closing remarks before we kind of break and go into kind of networking and cocktails, which is always interesting to folks. But in sort of closing remarks, I'd love for you guys to share. As recent as today, we see the Colorado legislature taking up this whole notion of trying to figure out what the utility of the future business model incentives should look like there. There's distribution. AB 327 in California has, is well underway in terms of the 3 IOUs out there coming up with their distribution plans and what a future distribution model looks like. As you kind of close and talk about sort of Rev and where we can see the next 6 to 12 months, how much impact do you see what's happening here in New York also spilling out into other jurisdictions around the states?
Certainly in the short term, the next 6 to 12 months. I think the biggest thing that's happening, and I think this transformation is exciting. There are a lot of things that are going on. I get excited about being able to have an intelligent grid and be more responsive rather than reactive to what's going on. But in New York, we're pushing out demonstration projects. And the opportunity for demonstration projects, I think, will help inform policy to help get things, I want to say right, or as close to right as you can, and give people the opportunity to participate. And I think one of the projects that we are advancing that we're hoping will catch on is what we're calling, and we got to come up with a catchier name than this. So if you have one, let me know. But it's called Community Solar, where we're building a solar facility that customers can subscribe to blocks of output from that facility, and then those blocks of energy that they buy from the facility in 100 kilowatt hour blocks, and they can buy them for 20 years at a fixed price for 20 years that can kind of give the customer a hedge and be able to offset their usage that they would be buying through an energy provider, could be us or somebody else. And the concept behind it is that not every customer has the opportunity to put solar on their roof. It may be because where they live, it may be because of their economic situation, it may be for a variety of other reasons, and we felt that was an unserved portion of our customer base that should have the opportunity, if they want renewable energy, to be able to access it. And so when you look at the incentives that we provide rooftop solar, and we believe that this facility, since it is really serving customers that don't have access to rooftop solar, should also be provided incentives that get rolled back to those customers. And you look at the costs to be able to build a community facility versus a rooftop facility, and the environmental value, the carbon reduction you get from it is so much more efficient in a manner like that than you do get from putting it on each and every roof when you look at how much value you can get for the subsidies you provide. So, we're trying to create things that become inclusive for all of our customers. Today rooftop solar can be a little bit, socially economic regressive, where, the customers that can't do it end up kind of subsidizing those that can do it. And, we're hoping that this helps, allow everybody to be part of it.
I think from my point of view, I would say what happens here with the REV program in New York will be watched very closely. Throughout the United States, I think it will lead the thinking in many respects within other parts of the United States. And I say that for a couple of reasons. One is the picture that's painted on REV is better than I've seen elsewhere. So that's a nice, ambitious target to be going after. I think the direction from the regulators is stronger than I've seen in other domains as well. And what's been very, very successful so far, I know it's very early stages and so on and so forth, is the regulator seems to have gathered all of the players into the room. So there's nobody outside taking a pot shot at this at the moment. Everybody's within the room now. I expect to see a lot of argy-bargy, quite a number of people falling out, etc., as we argue through which technologies will work, how's this market going to work, where's the utility going to play, what precisely the role of DSP, and so on and so forth. But New York will be ahead of anybody else in terms of having those fights and having those arguments. The other thing, just to mention, we are talking about a number of technology demos coming forward and so on. And that's good, right? But the technology to deliver REV exists already. It's demonstrated in lots of places. The only reason why we might go into demonstration projects is just that natural reluctance which happens within traditional utility communities. So it's probably a process that we need to go through. But that's not going to be the important bit of what we're doing here. It's the argument, debate, which happens now, which is get that big broad brush picture, what's the detail? Who owns what, how's it work?
Well, I'm going to jump off of what you said because I think the demonstration projects are different than usual demonstrations. The point that what we want to see is we want to see new business models. So it's actually not a test of technology. It's a test of what's a product that a company is ready to roll out, but the utility either doesn't have a role yet or isn't sure how to manage it. And now let's look and see what the business looks like, both for the utility and for the third party. So I just want to be clear, there's going to be more information coming out soon relating to demonstrations. So any companies interested in participating, I believe in a couple weeks, less than a couple weeks, there'll be notice out for a public information session. And just in terms of what's going on in New York and its potential impact, we hope that it has an impact in the rest of the country, and at a minimum that people kind of question the status quo and say, okay, well, we've been spending a lot of money and we've gotten here, that's good, but we believe we can do more. And what is taking place in New York right now is it's a living process and it's iterative. And so with the demonstrations, the opportunity there is to actually help inform what the rate structures look like, and say, okay, well, if we can, use storage to firm up the solar and all these things, then we can change. We want to propose a new rate structure, and I just think I don't know of a time that we've gotten to do this before, and it's not as opposed to like thinking, well, what's this existential question of the future of the utility? We're kind of trying to dig in and answer these questions together.
Great. So a round of applause, hopefully, for our panelists. Thank them very much. These lights are very unforgiving. And I believe there is a networking cocktail hour, half hour after this. And I know that the panelists and myself will be around to answer questions. And thanks a lot for everyone for taking time and joining us this evening.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.